When I found out, my mom traded me for my sister's success. I'm Leena, and for most of my life, I felt like the extra in a movie about my own family. You know, there but not really seen. I wasn't unloved, not exactly. My mom, Clara, had warmth in her voice and always said things like asterisk, family first, asterisk. But somehow, family usually meant my sister, Ivy. Ivy was the kind of kid adults adored on sight. Glossy hair, flawless posture, a polite smile rehearsed to perfection. She started dancing almost before she could read, and by 12 she was winning local competitions. Mom called her our rising star, every word soaked in pride. I'd stand beside them in family photos, holding a participation ribbon or maybe a science fair medal, watching Dad's hand rest on Ivy's shoulder like she was the trophy. It wasn't like Mom forgot me intentionally. She just seemed to think my feelings were something that could wait. If Ivy had rehearsal and I had a school event at the same time, Mom would say, "Sweetheart, of course you understand, your sister's show is important." I always said yes. That became my role, the understanding one. Birthdays were the clearest clues. Ivy got dance costumes custom sewn by Mom, while I'd unwrap a sweater one size too big. Christmas mornings meant applause for Ivy's big surprise, a new pair of point shoes. Mine, a notebook. Every year I told myself maybe next time she'd remember I liked art supplies or books about anatomy. Every year she didn't. Still, I convinced myself that's just how families work. Some kids shine brighter and others hold the flashlight. I joke about it with friends, pretending it didn't sting when people compared us. Teachers would say, "You must be so proud of your sister." I'd smile like pride was the only emotion allowed. Yet there were moments, a flicker in Mom's eyes when she looked at me too long, like she was startled by something familiar. Or nights when Dad lingered by my room to ask, "You doing okay, kiddo?" And Mom would call him back before I could answer. I didn't question it then. I was too busy trying to be grateful, telling myself love didn't have to be fair to be real. But deep down, it felt like there was a locked door in our family story. One mom didn't want anyone, especially me, to open. By the time Ivy turned 14, her name was everywhere, local newspapers, school announcements, even banners at community fairs. People would stop Mom at the grocery store to congratulate her, like she'd birthed some kind of miracle. Mom would beam and say, "Oh, I just give her the tools. The rest is Ivy's talent." But everyone knew Mom was the real force behind the performance. She lived through every pirouette, every ribbon, every win. I became her unpaid assistant. If Ivy needed sequins stitched at midnight, it was me threading the needle while Mom shouted instructions. When we packed for competitions, I was the one labeling makeup kits, ironing skirts, finding lost hairpins. Once, I left my own homework at school and got scolded for being irresponsible, right before Mom thanked me for keeping Ivy's costumes spotless. The irony was exhausting. At competitions, Mom transformed into a different creature, her voice tighter, eyes scanning everyone like a general in battle. She'd whisper strategies in Ivy's ear but hardly notice I was there unless she needed someone to fetch water or hold the garment back. I'd sit in the audience, clapping until my palms hurt, pretending pride drowned out envy. When Ivy won, Mom hugged her like she'd saved the family. When she lost, Mom's glare found me first, like failure floated in my direction. I thought maybe school could give me an identity of my own. When I won a regional essay contest, I ran home hoping Mom would finally brag about asterisk me asterisk. She barely looked up from sewing rhinestones. "That's nice, sweetheart," she said, then asked if I could deliver Ivy's registration forms downtown. I laughed, because crying would have felt too dramatic. Dad tried to balance things, but he was quiet, the kind of man who believed peace was more valuable than fairness. "You know your mom's under pressure," asterisk he'd mumble, handing me another piece of cake after everyone sang to Ivy. I told him I was fine. He wanted to believe me, so he did. The strangest part was how natural invisibility became. I learned to fade out of photos gracefully, to cheer loudly enough for Ivy to hear but softly enough not to seem jealous. Mom would sometimes pat my head, saying, "You're such a good sister, Leena. Ivy couldn't do this without you." It was supposed to be a compliment, but it felt like a warning. My role wasn't to exist beside Ivy, only behind her. When I'd lie awake at night, I'd imagine what it would be like to be noticed for something spontaneous and unplanned. Just me being me. Then I'd hear Mom ironing costumes downstairs, humming the tune from Ivy's upcoming routine, and I'd fall asleep to the sound of her faith in someone who wasn't me. And for a long time, I thought that was enough, until the cracks started to show. It happened one spring afternoon, right before the regional finals. Ivy had been rehearsing nonstop, desperate to nail a new routine with a jump that looked more like flying than dancing. Mom insisted on one more practice, even though Ivy's ankle was already swollen. I remember standing by the stereo, pretending to scroll through my phone, when I heard the sound, like a twig snapping. Ivy's scream followed a second later. The doctor said it wasn't a full break, just a severe sprain, but you'd think our house had been hit by a natural disaster. Mom moved in circles, cursing under her breath, calling coaches, begging for second opinions. Even dinner turned into a strategy meeting about recovery timelines and physiotherapy costs. I tried to help, brought ice packs, cooked soup, but everything I did seemed wrong. From her bed, Ivy turned mean. Maybe it was the pain, maybe fear, but she snapped at everyone. "You have no idea what this means," she hissed at me once. "You don't understand pressure, you never will." When Mom joined us, Ivy burst into tears and whispered, "It's her fault. She jinxed me." I stood there speechless, holding the melted ice bag, while Mom's eyes flickered toward me with something close to belief. Dad started coming home later, claiming overtime. The house felt heavier every day, like even the walls were nervous. I'd hear my parents arguing late at night, words like asterisk investment, loan, opportunity. One night I caught a phrase that made my stomach twist. "We gave up everything for her." The way Mom said everything sounded literal. I wanted to ask what they meant, but whenever I tried, Mom's smile tightened, polite and frightening at the same time. "Don't worry about grown-up stuff, Leena," she said once. "Focus on your studies. Your sister needs stability right now." The words felt rehearsed, as if she'd memorized them. Meanwhile, Ivy's recovery was slower than anyone hoped. Her sponsors grew impatient, rumors began swirling, and Mom grew more brittle by the hour. She started snapping at Dad, at the cat, and most of all at me. "Don't just stand there," she'd bark, handing me medication bottles or receipts. Somewhere between the middle of June and the end of July, something changed in her. The proud stage Mom turned desperate. I'd watch her pacing at night under the kitchen light, papers spread across the table, bills, I thought. Yet every time I approached, she'd hide them. That locked door feeling I'd had my whole life came back stronger, pressing behind my ribs. By August, Ivy could walk again, but the sparkle was gone from her eyes. Every conversation in that house whispered what if. I didn't know it then, but the fracture in her ankle was nothing compared to the one quietly forming in our family's foundation. Mom said the attic needed cleaning for fresh energy, which was unusual for her. She wasn't the type to care about clutter unless it affected Ivy's rehearsal space. She handed me gloves and disappeared downstairs, probably calling coaches again. The air up there was thick with dust and lost years. I found old trophies, Christmas decorations, baby clothes folded in paper bags yellowed by time. Then a box slid open, dropping a small sealed envelope stamped * confidential, medical records. I hesitated. My name wasn't on it, but curiosity prickled the back of my neck. I told myself I'd just glance inside to make sure it wasn't something important Mom had forgotten. But once I touched the flap, the breath left my lungs. The first page looked normal. Hospital logos, dates, signatures. Then I noticed the line that didn't make sense. Patient Ivy Walters, blood type OB. Mom and Dad were both type O. Biology class echoed in my mind. Type O parents can't have type AB children. My stomach turned cold. I kept flipping until I reached another set of papers labeled Neonatal Exchange, Authorization ID, CW09. Words blurred, but one phrase burned clear through my eyes. Arranged guardianship between parties in mutual agreement. Financial sponsorship provided. Child reassignment at birth. It didn't stop there. There was a signed letter. Mom's name, Clara Walters, handwriting unmistakable. "For Ivy's benefit," it said, describing an agreement with a patron family connected to a dance academy foundation. She de-traded her biological daughter for access, education, and a funding promise. And right there, under my original birth certificate, was the name * Helena Walsh. My name. The attic started spinning. I sat down on the wooden floor, pages trembling in my hands. So Ivy wasn't just the golden child because she danced beautifully. She literally belonged to the life Mom wanted. And me, I was the original, swapped out like an old costume that didn't fit the performance. I pressed the documents back into the envelope, sealing it as if I could unsee the truth. My brain scrambled for logic. Maybe it was a misunderstanding, some medical mix-up, but every instinct screamed otherwise. The look in Mom's eyes all those times she seemed startled by my face suddenly made sense. She'd been seeing her past, the child she once had and chose to replace. When I heard her footsteps on the stairs, I shoved the envelope into my backpack. "Find anything useful?" she asked, cheerful, almost manic. I swallowed hard and said, "Just junk." That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying every memory with new captions. Mom's special tenderness for Ivy, Dad's silence, their whispered fights about asterisk sacrifices. The puzzle assembled itself into something monstrous. What kind of mother could make that kind of bargain and then live as if nothing happened? I stared at the ceiling until sunrise, clutching the envelope beneath my pillow, the paper crinkling like a heartbeat. My world had been small but predictable. Now it stretched open into something terrible. The family I thought was imperfect, but real wasn't a family at all. It was a stage set, and I'd been the understudy who accidentally found the script. Downstairs, Mom's phone rang. I heard her say, "Yes, Ivy can perform again soon. Everything's under control." The words hit me like acid. I knew then something inside me had broken permanently, and nothing, not music or medals or apologies, would ever sound the same again. For days, I carried the envelope everywhere like a curse tucked under my arm. I'd walk through the house and see everything double, our family photos, smiles stretching over secrets. Every love you from Mom scraped against me like sandpaper. Even her cooking smelled fake. She'd leave plates on the table and ask me to check Ivy's practice videos, still pretending the world hadn't shifted off its axis. I started avoiding eye contact. She noticed, of course. "You've been quiet lately," she said one morning, stirring coffee too fast. "Is something wrong at school?" My mouth went dry, and before I could stop myself, the words spilled out. "Why is Ivy's blood type different from yours and Dad's?" For a second she froze, spoon mid-air. A crack appeared in her smile. "What do you mean?" she asked, light and casual, the way liars sound on TV. I pulled out the envelope, sliding the papers across the table. Watching her face drain of color felt terrifying, almost cruel. She didn't even try to read it. She just whispered, "You had no right to go through my things." "So it's true," I demanded. The tremor in my voice wasn't anger, it was heartbreak. Mom's lips quivered. "You don't understand what it was like back then," she said, voice breaking. "We were drowning. That sponsorship could change everything. I thought it was best for the family's future." "The family's future," I laughed, raw and hollow. "You traded your own daughter." She pressed her palms to her face and sobbed, repeating, "I never stopped loving you." That was the moment Ivy appeared at the doorway, hair tied in a messy bun, eyes wide. "What are you talking about?" she said. When Mom didn't answer, I handed Ivy the papers. Her jaw tightened as she read, then snapped toward me. "You're lying." "I wish I were," I said quietly. The explosion that followed felt years overdue. Ivy screamed, calling me jealous, bitter, crazy. I yelled back, reminding her I'd devoted my life to cheering for her. Mom tried to separate us, shrieking, "Stop! Think about the reporters! Think about your career!" That sentence silenced everyone. It proved what I'd always known. Her image mattered more than the truth. Mom dropped to her knees, reaching for me, but I stepped back. The kitchen smelled like burnt toast and betrayal. I remember saying, "You did it all for Ivy, and look what it cost us. You lost both daughters." Then I walked out, my heart pounding, the envelope clutched so tight it tore at the edges. Outside, the air felt different, colder, fresher, painfully real. For the first time, I wasn't the quiet girl in the background. I was the storm she never saw coming. I spent my first night away from home in my friend Marisol's tiny apartment, curled up on her couch under a blanket that smelled like lavender detergent. She didn't ask questions, just handed me tea and turned on a dim lamp. I think she could tell any word might break me. When she fell asleep, I lay there staring at her ceiling fan, spinning, spinning, the sound matching the rush in my head. If I wasn't who I thought I was, then who exactly had cried in that kitchen? The next morning, I looked in the mirror and saw someone I didn't recognize. Same brown eyes, same chipped nail polish, but empty behind the stare. It felt like my body belonged to a story I'd never agreed to live in. I texted Dad just one line, "I'm safe. Don't worry." He never replied. Maybe he didn't know what to say, or maybe Mom had already spun her version. Days turned into weeks, and I kept cycling between fury and grief. I'd feel this blazing hatred, then guilt for feeling it, like I was betraying the woman who'd raised me even if she'd rewritten who I was. Every childhood memory replayed with new filters. Birthdays, competitions. That time she forgot to pick me up from school because Ivy had rehearsal. The scenes were the same, but the meanings had mutated. Marisol finally pushed me toward therapy. "You can't bottle nuclear waste forever," she said. The therapist's office smelled like coffee and paper. I sat there holding tissues, trying to summarize 17 years of emotional gaslighting into 50 minutes. "I feel disposable," I admitted. "Like I was a placeholder until the real daughter performed better." The therapist nodded softly, said something about trauma bonds and rebuilding self-concept. Big words, but I clung to them like lifebuoys. At night, I wrote in a journal, forcing myself to name things I'd never allowed before. Resentment, loneliness, envy, rage. Putting them on paper didn't erase them, but it made them visible, which felt like progress. Some entries turned into sketches, my mom as a shadow holding strings, Ivy floating like a puppet. It was dark, but at least it was mine. There were small, ordinary victories. I cooked my own dinner without feeling guilty. I played music I liked instead of Ivy's endless rehearsals. Slowly, I started existing without an audience. Still, certain things broke me. Hearing a mother and daughter laugh at the grocery store, running into Ivy's face on a poster they hadn't yet taken down. The world thought we were still a happy family. Some nights I whispered, "Who am I?" into the dark and answered with silence. Other nights I managed, "I'm still here." It wasn't healing, not yet, but it was something. 6 months later, just when I'd started to breathe normally again, the story broke. I was on my way to a part-time shift at a bookstore when my phone buzzed nonstop. Headlines flooded every feed. Local dance prodigy's secret adoption exposed. There were photos of Ivy, of course, glittering under harsh headlines. My stomach knotted as I scrolled. Some journalist had obtained anonymous medical documents. I didn't have to guess where they came from. By lunchtime, reporters camped outside our old house. Clips of Mom crying into her hands played on local news. They called it a * family misunderstanding, *a* privacy violation, * media circus. But everyone could smell blood. Sponsors withdrew. Comment sections exploded. People who once praised Ivy now mocked her. It was brutal, and even though I hadn't leaked anything, guilt hit like a truck. Mom started leaving me voicemails, her voice cracking. "Leena, they're destroying us. Please, you have to help. Tell them we're still a family." She begged me to post something kind, anything, to soften the blow. I listened to her messages but couldn't bring myself to respond. I wasn't a public relations tool anymore. Then Ivy called. I almost didn't answer, but hearing her whisper "please" disarmed me. She sounded smaller than I'd ever known her. "They won't stop calling me a fraud," she said. "I didn't even know." "I know you didn't," I said quietly. Silence stretched, the kind where forgiveness teeters on a cliff. She asked, "Do you hate me?" "I never hated you," I admitted. "I hated the system Mom built around you." We met a week later at a park we used to visit as kids. The air felt weirdly peaceful. Ivy wore sunglasses but couldn't hide swollen eyes. We sat on the swings like awkward ghosts of our younger selves. She said, "She used both of us, didn't she?" I nodded. "She wanted perfect, and we just wanted her." For a few minutes, neither of us spoke. Birds sang, oblivious. Ivy finally said, "What happens now?" "I guess we stop pretending," I answered. "Start building our own truth." She reached over and squeezed my hand. I felt fragile forgiveness forming, not because things were fine, but because they weren't, and we both knew it. Later that night, a new headline appeared. Walter's sisters refused to comment. For once, silence was the only statement we needed. I'd been avoiding that house for nearly a year before I finally went back. The front lawn looked overgrown, the porch light dead. Mom's once immaculate roses were dry stalks leaning toward the sidewalk like they'd given up, too. Dad opened the door when I knocked, thinner than I remembered, worry carved into his face. "She's not doing well," he muttered, stepping aside. The hallway smelled like dust and nostalgia. Every picture frame along the wall still showcased Ivy mid-spin, mid-smile. I half expected one to whisper, "Keep smiling," as I passed. Mom sat at the kitchen table with a half-finished cup of tea, eyes glassy, shoulders sagging. The confident woman who used to command entire rooms now looked like she was afraid of her own reflection. "Leena," she breathed, like saying my name hurt. "You came." "I needed to," I replied. My voice didn't shake this time. Therapy had siphoned out the fear. She gestured to the chair across from her. "I've wanted to explain. I read your letters to the academy," I said, sitting down. "You already explained everything back then. You wanted success more than honesty." Tears welled up quick as rain. "That's not fair. I wanted stability, opportunities, things we never had." Dad entered quietly, standing behind her like a faded ghost. "Leena," he said softly, "I knew part of it. I didn't stop her. I was terrified of losing both daughters." The confession hit harder than expected, but it also made sense. The quiet, the avoidance, it had always been cowardice disguised as calm. "You both made choices," I said, hands clasped together, "and we paid for them." Rain started drumming against the windows, a low, persistent heartbeat. The house seemed to shrink around us. I took a breath and looked straight at them. "Do you even realize what conditional love does to someone? You trained us to believe affection had to be earned. Ivy believed she had to dance for it. I believed I didn't deserve it at all." Mom sobbed openly now, clutching her teacup. "I ruined everything." "No," I said quietly. "You built something fragile and called it love. It couldn't survive truth." Lightning flashed outside, illuminating the photo wall, row after row of Ivy smiling, trophies gleaming beside her. In that brief flicker, the pictures looked like gravestones, shrines to the death of who we'd pretended to be. I can't undo it, Mom whispered. I don't want you to, I said. I just need you to stop pretending it was for anyone's good but your own. She looked up, guilt swimming in her eyes. I keep dreaming that you're little again, hugging me, saying you understand. I do understand, I said, voice steady. Understanding isn't forgiveness. Dad finally stepped forward, placing a trembling hand on my shoulder. We're sorry, Leena, he said, both of us. Something in me unclenched, not healed, just loosened. I stood, glancing around the dim kitchen one last time. I'm not here for permission anymore, I told them. I'm here to say goodbye the proper way. Mom reached out. You're leaving again. Yes, I said, but this time it's not running away. It's walking forward. The rain roared against the roof as I stepped outside. The house behind me glowed faintly through the storm, its windows reflecting flashes of lightning like shuttered eyes. For the first time, I pitied my mother, not the monster I'd built in my head, just a woman trapped inside her own regret. Moving on wasn't cinematic. It was paperwork, cheap coffee, budgeting apps, therapy bills. But raw freedom tasted better than guilt. I changed my last name back to Walsh, the one buried in those hospital files. Signing it on forms felt strange at first, like wearing shoes slightly too big, but with every signature it started to fit. I applied to an art program using a portfolio built from all those sleepless nights, the sketches of puppets, shadows, mirrored faces. When the acceptance email arrived, I cried for the first time in months, not out of pain but relief. I finally had something that belonged to me, no footnotes attached. I still talked to Ivy sometimes. She was in therapy too, learning to breathe without applause. The tabloids had moved on to someone else's tragedy, and she was quietly rebuilding, teaching dance to little kids who didn't care about trophies. We'd text late at night about random things, recipes, bad TV, the absurdity of DNA tests figuring out what love couldn't. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. Mom sent letters occasionally, short, careful ones about the weather, never about the past. I read them, then stored them in a box I labeled * unresolved. I didn't hate her anymore, but I didn't owe her peace either. Forgiveness, I was learning, didn't mean keeping the door unlocked. Painting became my therapy. Oils, acrylics, charcoal, it all spilled out like confession. I painted faceless mothers, twin daughters, empty stages. When my professor asked what the series was about, I said, identity, though what I meant was survival. For the first time, I wasn't the helper or the secret. I was a whole person learning to love the messy parts, my anger, my ambition, my voice. Ivy once told me, you always were the strong one. I used to think strength meant silence. Now I knew it meant daring to speak at all. One morning, I caught my reflection in a studio mirror. Paint smudged on my cheek, hair pinned up carelessly, eyes bright. I smiled. No stage lights, no audience, just me, and that was enough. Sometimes I think about how a single secret rewired an entire family. Mom thought she was buying success for one daughter, but what she really purchased was silence. In the end, that silence devoured everything. Yet here I am, breathing through the ruins, finding something almost peaceful where the chaos used to live. I've learned forgiveness isn't sparkle or applause. It's slow, quiet, stubborn healing. It means releasing the story you were supposed to live and writing your own without asking permission. I don't excuse what Mom did, but I've stopped carrying it like a weight strapped to my ribs. When people ask about my family, I tell the truth in pieces, enough to be honest, not enough to bleed. The irony still stings. Being traded away gave me freedom. If I'd stayed her obedient shadow forever, I might never have understood what integrity feels like. Pain, in its twisted way, handed me my voice. Last winter, while preparing for my first student exhibition, I found myself painting two girls again. This time they weren't faceless. I painted Ivy and me holding hands. Behind us stood a distant figure, our mother, blurred but present, watching. The piece felt different, not bitter but soft, maybe even compassionate. I titled it Both Daughters. When the exhibit ended, I wrapped the canvas and mailed it to the old house with a short note. No revenge, just release. I didn't expect a reply, but a week later a package arrived, a photograph of the painting hanging above the fireplace. No words, just that image. Somehow it was enough. Ivy visited soon after, bringing takeout and a laugh that sounded lighter. We talked about starting over, no stage names, no lies. She said, maybe we can both be the normal ones for once. I smiled. Normal was overrated, but peace was gold. At night, I sometimes dream of us as kids again, running through sprinklers, sunlight on our faces before we learned envy. Mom stands at the porch watching. In the dream, she doesn't speak, and she doesn't need to. I wake up calm. People assume stories like mine end in rage or triumph, but the truth lands somewhere gentler. Healing isn't fireworks. It's the slow sunset after the storm, warm and quiet and finally finally safe. I used to crave her approval. Now I crave mornings like this one. A paint-stained desk, coffee gone cold, birds arguing outside, and me still learning who I am. But this time, the story belongs entirely to me.